Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector. As you can hear, I am still sick. I was not gonna make a video today, but I'm down here in the game room putting away some of my third and fourth generation games, and I felt like I had enough of a voice to make a quick video on this topic. A lot of people, especially folks who are new to collecting retro games and video games, they try to figure out where they should start, like where they should start buying video games. And in my opinion, I personally don't think that if you're brand new to retro game collecting, I do not think starting with the fourth generation or the third generation, I don't think that's a great place to start. Fourth generation games are going to be games like games for the Sega Genesis, games for the Super Nintendo. I guess you could throw like Neo Geo in there. Turbo Graphics maybe. I'm not sure if that's I guess that would be fourth generation. I don't think that that would be the best generation to start in. The reason why I say that is because while there are a lot of games available for the third and fourth generation consoles, meaning, yes, are there a lot of really fun games for the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis? Yes, there are. But the challenge that you're going to run into is that those games, the really good games, the games that everyone wants, those games are wildly expensive. They're going to be really, really expensive. And I don't think that that's a good place to start. So I don't think you should start buying individual third and fourth generation games. And not only is it a bad idea because of the price, but also because for the third and fourth generations, there are a lot of less expensive ways that you can play some of the best games for those generations without having to break the bank or even engage in emulation. Like if you take the Sega Genesis, for instance, there are a lot of Sega Genesis compilation discs and cartridges. There is a Sega collection on the PlayStation 3, the PlayStation 4. You've got them for the 360. You've got Genesis collections. I mean, there's so many different Genesis collections that are out there. And usually these collections will have the more popular Sega Genesis games, like your Altered Beasts and your Sonic the Hedgehogs and your Elisa Dragoons. So when it comes to the Sega Genesis and even the Super Nintendo, there's a lot of compilation discs that are out there, or compilation cartridges. Now, even if you, let's say you didn't want to go the compilation disc route, you've also got the minis. There's a Sega Genesis mini. There is a Super Nintendo mini. You've got a lot of mini consoles that came out for the third and fourth generation. And those mini consoles have a lot of the really good games on them. So you don't even really have to go out and spend the type of money that you would spend to get some of these games that, can be a bit pricey. Now, don't get me wrong. Not all third and fourth generation games are really expensive. But why, in my opinion, I say, why do that when you can buy a licensed mini console that has all of the good stuff on it? So that's a cheap way to go about doing that. I honestly wouldn't recommend anyone start with third and fourth generation today. That is the third and fourth generation video games. While they may have come down in price, they are still some of the most expensive generations to collect for if you're collecting the good games, And notice what I'm saying. I'm not saying the most expensive games. I'm saying the games that are actually good. Like Elisa Dragoon is a good game. Ghouls and Ghost is a good game. Streets of Rage is a good game. Those games are not cheap. You know what I mean? They are going to cost you some money. And the same thing with the Super Nintendo. Even some of the more basic, like a lot of the, not basic, but a lot of the games on the Super Nintendo that you wouldn't think would be expensive are still going to run a pretty penny. Like The Legend of Zelda, this is still a $35 to $40 game for some reason. Or we could take one even better. How about Super Metroid? Super Metroid is like a $65 game today, which is wild because there's a lot of ways you can play both of these games, right? You have both of those games on the SNES Mini. It's just that for whatever reason, there's still a lot of nostalgia tied to these generations. And I think that third and fourth generation is where a lot of the most famous franchises either were originated or really popularized. You know what I mean? I think about games like the Street Fighter series. I think about games like Mario. I think about games like Sonic. A lot of these games, these characters, these franchises, either they were originated in the third and fourth generation or they were popularized in the third and fourth generation. And what do I mean they were popularized? I mean, you heard more celebrities talking about video games in the 80s and 90s, probably more than you had any time before it, right? Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. I mean, you heard Biggie talk about it, right? You saw Street Fighter in some of your most iconic movies, Mario in some of your most iconic movies. So, at that time, a lot of these consoles were really popularized and more ingrained in pop culture. And a lot of these characters became more household names. I could be wrong, but at least that's what it felt like to me, because I actually grew up in the 90s, right? So I was like there live in concert when all of this was going on. And, in the 80s, yeah, you knew about like Mario. If you were a gamer, you knew about these games. But in the 90s, that's when I feel like a lot of these characters were really popularized. So, if you want to get into collecting, listen, I say go for it. I just don't think I would start here. This generation is a tough generation to collect for. The odds of you finding a lot of games out in the wild for the third and fourth generation are slim to none. You're probably not going to find a lot of games just chilling out there. Most of the games that, you find for like the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, you're going to have to either find them online, or you're going to have to go on like Facebook Marketplace or something like that and see if you can find someone who's selling them in a lot. That would probably be the best way to try to pick these games up. If you can pick them up in a lot, do something like that, that might be, a good route to go. But just trying to just jump out the window and, start off with just buying like a bunch of just, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis games, I personally don't recommend it. But you guys let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you think a person can start building their collection with third and fourth generation games? Or do you think that the third and fourth generation is just too far out of reach and people will be better served kind of aiming maybe for the seventh generation or even the sixth generation? I'm interested to know your thoughts here, because you do have a lot of folks who do want to build their collection. You have a lot of folks that do want to add games to their collection, but they're still trying to figure out where the best place is to start. And I have a lot of nostalgia for this generation. I have a ton of nostalgia for it. Like, I grew up in this time frame. If I didn't grow up in the 80s and 90s, then I probably wouldn't care about these games as much as I do. But because I did, these games mean a whole lot more to me. And even a lot of the characters, like a lot of the characters that you see in some of these games, like Spider-Man, I watched that on Fox 5 on Saturday mornings. Ninja Turtles, I watched that when it was first coming out. X-Men, 92, I actually watched this cartoon in 92 and 93. So like these hold like some real memories for me as a kid. And if this is not a generation that kind of generates or stimulates that level of nostalgia in you, it may not be, you know, it may not be something that you need to kind of dive too far into. But again, let me know down in the comments. I'm just doing a little bit of cleanup down here, just kind of organizing some of these games down here. I figured I'd make a quick video for you guys. Let me know what you think, and I'll catch you in the next video. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.